there are many stages and states that describe a greater and greater equilibrium of one's intellect with consciousness. But it boils down to 5 basic reflexes. That are clearly perceivable levels of attention. That are considered levels of samadhi. There is laya samadhi, savakalpa samadhi, asampranyata samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi, and sahaj samadhi. The laya samadhi is, the word laya means light. So in the stages and states of meditation, where one's mind becomes flooded with light, it's like the first beginning of the samadhi process. It's always very dramatic when you meditate. And in your first years of meditation, you're struggling and you're going through all kinds of processes and qualities of purification. But then you get through a stage where your being, your mind, body, being reflex begins to be flooded with light. You see light flooding through your system. And that is it floods your inner eye. You see it spreading everywhere within you. And that is the beginning of the onset of the samadhi condition. It usually is accompanied with great feelings of well-being, of bliss, of happiness. The light, the quality of seeing the light is like it uplifts your heart and mind, and because the mind becomes free from its routines and its thoughts and begins to immerse itself in light. The savakalpa samadhi is the first level of samadhi where the intellect has direct apprehension of the ocean of consciousness. At the same time, it maintains its quality as cognition. So its cognitive value of I and that quality of consciousness hold together. It's like I am that. And you see the ocean of consciousness, and you feel, and you know it to be God. You experience it directly as God. But you also experience yourself as a sustained center of perception. You maintain your identity as a perceiver. And so it is a very powerful state. It is because it is, well, it's simply that. When your consciousness sees consciousness itself, it knows the truth of God. And it will take the form of different gods or goddesses, qualities of light, fantastic movements of consciousness, movements of attention. As it expands, your consciousness expands and dilates. And you'll be aware of experiences. But what's important, the important point is to say that the savakalpa is the direct apprehension of God and the survival of the center of perception of the intellect. You are there to experience it. It's very ecstatic because it is, again, filled with bliss and the monumental presence of God and everything that comes into play with that. And at the same time, the awareness of the existence of your own identity. After the Savakalpa, there is the movement of the intellect, essentially beginning to be absorbed by the ocean of consciousness. The Sufis speak of the drop that becomes the ocean, and the ocean that becomes the drop. And once the Savakalpa Samadhi occurs, the identity of the drop and the identity of the ocean begin to lose their separateness. There is a quality of absorption that are oftentimes referred to as the 10 states of God. And these stages, and these states are connected to a stage of consciousness that is called the asampranyata, wherein, as the identity of the intellect is absorbed into the ocean of consciousness, essentially one of the defining qualities of the asampranyata is the relative states of the physical, subtle physical, and mental bodies begin to be absorbed. In the Savakalpa, we feel like, it's God. I see God. I am God, and we feel that flooding of consciousnness, and we feel it in our minds. We feel it in our subtle bodies. We feel it in our bodies, and our identity is obtained. It remains intact. That's the beginning of equilibrium. In the Asampranyata, the absorption of the 10 states of God, what we see is the qualities of the 3 relative bodies of body, speech, and mind: physical, subtle physical, and mental bodies begin to be absorbed by the ocean. In other words, the drop begins to indeed disappear into the ocean. And what begins to be marked by the Sampranyata stage is that you lose all contact with the elements of gross consciousness, gross physical consciousness, the dynamic of any quality of perception of mind, awareness of the body, the feeling of the relationship between the drop and the ocean goes away. That element of the intellect in coming into equilibrium with the ocean of consciousness is simply absorbed and ceases to operate. And so when you go into a deep state of sampranyata, this is where you simply black out, you're gone. It'll tend to be in states where you are meditating and you'll come and go. And that's simply it. Yeah, you simply white out. You're not there, but you come and go. Asampranyata. As these 10 states of God, more and more of the drop of individual, separate identity are absorbed. And you come to a state of nirvikalpa. The word vikalpa means imagination, quality of thought. Because from the standpoint of the perfection of consciousness that is constant and unchanging, all the fluctuations of perception, or even the vikalpas, the waves of attention, are like movements of imagination. It's like the factors of a dream. The dream of separate identity, the dream of being alive, the dream of being a man, the dream of being a woman. Living your life out in this world. Constantly changing.